The Philippines was awakening to the intense heat rising from the streets of Manila as Manny Pacquiao, known worldwide as Manny, observed the city skyline from the window of his middle-class apartment. His body, marked by years of battles in the ring, still maintained the strength that had led him to conquer 8 world titles in different weight classes, a feat never achieved by any other fighter in history. Behind the public figure of the legendary boxer and respected politician existed a simple man who carried the invisible scars of a difficult childhood in the outskirts of General Santos City, where he had known hunger and extreme poverty. Manny's life had changed drastically over the last 2 decades, transforming the boy who once sold bread on the streets to help support his family into the national idol who now held a seat in the Filipino Senate. His routine was divided between parliamentary sessions, training to maintain his physical shape, and commitments with sponsors who still saw value in associating their brands with the champion's image. However, what truly gave meaning to his existence was his marriage to Jinkee, his companion since the days when he fought in improvised arenas for a few pesos before fame and fortune arrived. On that particular morning, Manny had awakened with a strange presentiment, an uneasiness he couldn't explain. He checked his phone and saw dozens of unread messages, something unusual even for someone with his popularity. Social media notifications exploded with mentions of his name, all related to an interview Jinkee had given the previous night on one of the most watched television programs in the Philippines. Manny felt his stomach sink. He didn't know about any scheduled interview, and Jinkee had left the night before saying only that she was meeting some friends. The boxer sat on the edge of the bed, breathing deeply while trying to organize his thoughts. The marriage had been going through a difficult phase in recent months, with frequent discussions about the division of time between his political career and family. Jinkee always complained about her husband's absence, the long trips and commitments that kept him away from home and their 5 children, Emmanuel Jr., Michael, Princess, Queen Elizabeth, and Israel. Manny wondered if the interview was related to marital problems, and the possibility of a public scandal involving his marriage made his heart race. With slightly trembling hands, Manny opened one of the messages containing the link to the complete interview. As the video loaded, he remembered the vows he had made to Jinkee at the altar of the small church in General Santos, promising to love and protect her for life. He took another deep breath and pressed the play button, not imagining that the content of that public confession would forever change the course of his life and the way the world saw him, not just as an athlete and politician, but as a human being. The interview began with Jinkee Pacquiao sitting on an elegant studio sofa, wearing a traditional Filipino dress in soft blue tones, her black hair perfectly arranged, and an expression of unusual seriousness for her normally cheerful temperament. The host, Karina Sanchez, known for her incisive questions and ability to extract bombshell revelations from her interviewees, introduced Jinkee as the wife of the legendary boxer and current senator, Manny Pacquiao. The camera captured Jinkee's nervousness through small gestures, her fingers drumming on her purse, the way she repeatedly adjusted the pearl necklace Manny had given her on their wedding anniversary. As he watched, Manny felt cold sweat trickling down his forehead, imagining what kind of confession his wife would make in front of millions of viewers. Rumors about marital problems had been circulating for months in Manila's sensationalist press, fueled by the couple's distant behavior at recent public events. The Filipino media, always eager for scandals involving public figures, speculated about possible infidelities, irreconcilable differences, and even an imminent divorce that would shake the structures of the country's traditionally Catholic society. The host wasted no time with pleasantries and soon launched the question everyone wanted to hear. Jinkee, you requested this space to make a public confession about your marriage to Manny Pacquiao. What do you have to say that couldn't be resolved in private? On the screen, Manny observed his wife's expression transform into a mixture of determination and vulnerability. She took a deep breath, adjusted herself in the chair, and began to speak about the years beside the boxer, from the times of hardship to the meteoric rise that had transformed them into one of the most influential families in the Philippines. Jinkee narrated with a choked voice how difficult it had been to accompany Manny's trajectory. The long periods of separation during training and international fights, the constant fear of receiving news that he had been seriously injured in the ring. She also spoke about the pressure of living under the spotlight, raising children amid fame and the demands of an impeccable public image. Manny felt his heart tighten as he realized how much his pursuit of glory had weighed on his companion's shoulders. Tears beginning to form in his eyes as he heard Jinkee describe moments of loneliness he had never imagined she had felt. The tension grew as the interview progressed, and Manny mentally prepared himself for the final blow. Perhaps the revelation of an extramarital affair, the announcement of separation, or some accusation that would destroy his carefully constructed reputation over the years. His fists closed involuntarily, the old pugilist reflex in the face of an attack threat, as he awaited the confession that could knock out his personal life in a more devastating way than any opponent he had faced in the ring. "What I'm going to reveal today," Jinkee continued in the interview, "is something I've kept secret for more than 8 years, with the help of very few trusted people." The dramatic pause that followed made Manny hold his breath, his mind racing through all the possibilities of what could have happened 8 years ago. At that time, he was at the peak of his career, accumulating millions of dollars in international fight purses and beginning to chart his plans for entry into politics. It was when they bought the mansion in an exclusive Manila compound and enrolled their children in the country's best schools. Jinkee then revealed that, while Manny focused on his career and earned millions, she had made a decision that would secretly change the destiny of the Pacquiao family. With resources from the fights and without her husband's knowledge, Jinkee had created a clandestine network supporting street children in various Philippine cities. Using separate bank accounts and the help of close friends who administered the projects, she had allocated approximately 40% of the entire family fortune to lift young people out of extreme poverty, providing them with food, education, and opportunities that Manny did not have in his own childhood. The images on the screen changed to show small community centers in poor neighborhoods, children receiving meals, supplementary school classes, and even basic boxing training. None of these initiatives carried the Pacquiao name or made any reference to the famous boxer. They were discreet projects, managed by ordinary people who never revealed the source of the resources. Manny watched in astonishment, recognizing some of the locations shown as areas he had visited during political campaigns, never suspecting that his own wife was the anonymous benefactor behind the social improvements he had found. "I never wanted to use these actions to promote my husband's image or to gain personal recognition," Jinkee explained to the visibly surprised host. "I grew up seeing Manny's suffering on the streets of General Santos, hearing his stories of how he slept in cardboard boxes and fought for a plate of food. When fortune came to our hands, I felt it was my responsibility to do something meaningful without turning it into a public relations strategy. That's why I kept everything secret, even from Manny, so that the actions would be genuine and not just another media spectacle." As the interview progressed, Manny discovered that, while he was buying luxury cars and properties, imagining he was building an empire to secure the family's future, Jinkee was silently redirecting a significant portion of the resources to transform the lives of thousands of Filipino children. The boxer felt a confused mixture of emotions: surprise at the magnitude of what his wife had accomplished, pride in her generosity, but also a twinge of hurt for having been kept in the dark about something so important during so many years of marriage. As host Karina tried to process the magnitude of the revelation, questioning the logistical details of how Jinkee had managed to keep such an operation secret for so long, the boxer's wife explained the elaborate system she had created. Childhood friends from General Santos, people with no apparent connection to the Pacquiao family, had been recruited as administrators of the various projects. The money passed through a series of legitimate accounts and foundations before reaching its final destination, never leaving a trail that could be traced back to Jinkee. Our personal accountant, Ramiro, was the only one on the financial team who knew from the beginning, and only because I needed his help to structure everything legally, she confessed. Manny paused the video for a moment, remembering the various occasions when Ramiro, a 60-year-old gentleman who had been taking care of the family's finances for more than a decade, had discreetly suggested that he not worry so much about the details of financial movements, "You focus on fighting and your work in the Senate, Senator. The numbers are all in order," the accountant would always say with a serene smile that now took on new meaning. Manny had never questioned deeply, trusting the team that Jinkee supervised with remarkable efficiency, while he dedicated himself to training and, later, to political responsibilities. Resuming the interview, Manny heard Jinkee explain that her decision to reveal everything publicly at that moment was related to Manny's recent proposal to sell some properties to finance his possible candidacy for presidency in the upcoming elections. "I couldn't let him make such important decisions without knowing the complete reality of our financial situation. Our assets are significantly less than he imagines, although we still have more than enough to live comfortably. But more importantly, I wanted him to know the true legacy we've built together, even without his direct knowledge." Jinkee's words carried a weight that made Manny see the last few years in a new perspective. The discussions about excessive spending, the times she had suggested a more modest life, the disinterest in the sports cars and private jets that he so valued as symbols of his success, it all made sense now. While he sought validation through material possessions, trying to compensate for the extreme poverty of the past, Jinkee was silently working to ensure that other children wouldn't have to go through the same suffering that had marked her husband's childhood. The camera focused on Jinkee's face when she revealed the final reason for her public confession. "I decided I could no longer carry this secret alone, especially now that we're seeing the concrete results. Some of the first children we helped are already graduating from universities, becoming nurses, teachers, engineers. One of them even followed in Manny's footsteps and is standing out in amateur boxing. My husband deserves to know that his success has transformed many more lives than he imagines, even without his conscious participation. And I want him to decide, with full knowledge, what direction we will give to this work from now on." Social media exploded immediately after the interview broadcast. Hashtags like Jinkee Hero and Pacquiao Secret dominated trends in the Philippines and quickly spread around the world. Journalists desperately tried to locate the community centers shown in the report, but found only modest operations that functioned discreetly, without signs or markings indicating any connection to specific donors. The administrators, prepared by Jinkee for the moment of revelation, limited themselves to confirming that the resources came from generous people who prefer to remain anonymous, and highlighted the work accomplished instead of the source of funding. Manny turned off his cell phone after being flooded with messages from friends, Senate colleagues, and journalists asking for comments on the bombshell revelation. He needed to process everything before making any public statement. Sitting alone in the living room of his Manila apartment, the legendary boxer mentally relived the last 8 years, identifying moments when he could have noticed what was happening right under his nose. Jinkee's frequent trips to visit relatives in different provinces, meetings with old school friends he had never personally met, calls she abruptly interrupted when he entered the room. Jinkee's revelation placed Manny in a delicate position. On one hand, he felt deeply touched by his wife's generosity and vision, by the way she had honored his humble origins through concrete actions instead of empty speeches. On the other hand, he couldn't ignore the breach of trust that keeping a secret of this magnitude represented during so many years of marriage, making unilateral decisions about a patrimony that belonged to both. As a man raised in traditional Filipino culture, where the husband was seen as the provider and head of the family, he felt his pride wounded upon discovering that a large part of his earnings had been redirected without his knowledge or consent. As night fell over Manila, Manny headed to the small gym he maintained in the building's basement, seeking in the familiar exercise routine the mental clarity he had always found through physical effort. He pounded the punching bag for hours, his body still agile despite years of professional combat, sweating not just from the exercise, but from the emotional tension consuming him. With each blow, a question echoed in his mind: how to publicly react to Jinkee's confession. Should he support her unconditionally, recognizing the nobility of her intentions, or express his hurt over the lack of transparency, risking being seen as petty and materialistic by public opinion? The first lights of morning found Manny still awake, now sitting on the apartment balcony watching the sunrise over Manila Bay. He had made his decision. He called Buboy Fernandez, his longtime trainer and close confidant, asking him to organize a press conference for that same afternoon. "Don't notify Jinkee," he instructed with a firm voice. "She had her moment to reveal her truth to the public. Now it's my turn to reveal mine." Buboy hesitated for a moment, concerned about his friend's serious tone, but confirmed that everything would be arranged as requested. As he hung up the phone, Manny observed the first fishing boats returning after a night's work in the bay. Simple men like his father had been, fighting daily for survival in a country where the distance between rich and poor seemed insurmountable. The conference room at the Manila Bay Hotel in the center of the capital was packed with journalists from all Philippine media outlets and international correspondents. The news that Manny Pacquiao would make his first public appearance after his wife's bombshell revelation had spread like wildfire. Speculations about a possible divorce, financial irregularity accusations, or even the announcement of his definitive retirement from politics circulated among those present. At the back of the room, discreetly positioned among advisors, Jinkee watched with an apprehensive expression, surprised by the last-minute invitation sent by Buboy for her to attend without prior notice to her husband. Precisely at 3 o'clock, Manny entered the room wearing an impeccable navy blue suit, the serious expression he had so often displayed before big fights. The murmuring instantly ceased. The boxer greeted everyone with a restrained nod and took his place behind the podium decorated with the Philippine flag. He took a deep breath, adjusted the microphone, and began to speak with the firm voice that had marked his speeches in the Senate. "I thank everyone for their presence. As you know, 2 days ago my wife Jinkee made a public revelation that surprised not only the nation, but primarily me. Today I am here to share my reaction to that confession." A tense silence hung over the room as Manny made a strategic pause, his eyes scanning the attentive faces of journalists, briefly dwelling on Jinkee before continuing. "When I watched that interview, I discovered that a large part of the fortune I accumulated throughout my career had been silently directed to help vulnerable children across the country. I discovered that, while I fought in the ring and later in the corridors of Congress, my wife waged her own silent battle against the poverty that marked my childhood and continues to affect millions of Filipinos." Manny's expression softened slightly, and a faint smile touched his lips before he continued. "Some expect me to feel betrayed by the lack of transparency. Others, that I celebrate Jinkee's generosity. The truth is that my initial reaction included both feelings, plus many others." Manny then revealed that he had spent the last 48 hours not just reflecting, but also personally investigating. He asked Buboy to organize unannounced visits to some of the community centers mentioned in the interview, where he presented himself without his usual entourage, just as an ordinary citizen interested in the work being developed. "Twice what I found," he continued with a slightly choked voice, "were places where children like I once was receive not just food and education, but dignity and hope. I spoke with young people who, thanks to these projects, are following paths I could never have dreamed of in my childhood without the opportunity that boxing provided me." At this moment, Manny signaled for the large screens in the background to show photographs he had taken with his cell phone during these visits. Images of children studying in simple but well-equipped rooms, teenagers in small boxing gyms, community kitchens serving nutritious meals. As the images passed, Manny concluded his initial speech. "My wife chose to use our fortune not to glorify our name or build monuments to vanity, but to silently change lives we would never know. She chose true charity, the one that doesn't seek recognition or return. Therefore, my response to Jinkee's confession is this: not only do I fully support what she did, but I announce today that I will dedicate half of my time in the Senate to transform these isolated initiatives into a national policy supporting vulnerable children, based exactly on the model she created." Camera flashes exploded as Manny descended from the podium and walked toward Jinkee, who remained motionless at the back of the room, silent tears streaming down her face. The boxer extended his hand to his wife and gently led her to the center of the stage, where he embraced her at length under the emotional gazes of the journalists present. They were not just husband and wife at that moment, but symbols of a partnership that transcended conventional marriage, He, the fighter who had overcome poverty through his physical strength and determination. She, the silent strategist who had multiplied that personal victory for the benefit of thousands. The days following the press conference transformed Manila into a whirlwind of activity. Journalists from all corners of the world sought exclusive interviews with the Pacquiao couple, now celebrated as an example of authentic philanthropy. Politicians from all spectrums tried to associate themselves with the initiative, while Filipino celebrities announced donations to the formerly anonymous projects. Manny, however, remained firm in his promise to preserve the essence of the work created by Jinkee. The centers would continue to operate discreetly, without commemorative plaques or pompous names, focused exclusively on results for the communities served. In the Philippine Senate, Manny surprised colleagues and adversaries by presenting a detailed bill proposing the creation of a national network of support centers for vulnerable children, directly inspired by the model secretly developed by Jinkee. The project, developed with the advice of experts who had worked behind the scenes of the programs for years, provided for public financing and partnerships with private initiative, but with rigorous transparency mechanisms and results evaluation. The proposal quickly gained multi-partisan support, with political analysts highlighting how Manny had managed to transform a potential marital crisis into a platform for national unification. At home, away from the spotlight, the Pacquiao couple underwent their own transformation. The nights were now filled with long conversations where Jinkee finally shared stories from years of secret work. The initial difficulties in structuring the first center in General Santos, her hometown, the moments of doubt when she almost revealed everything to Manny, the emotion of seeing the first young people being accepted into universities. Manny, in turn, admitted how he had strayed from the essential values of his youth, allowing himself to be seduced by the superficial symbols of success he had so valued in recent years. One afternoon, while they were visiting one of the centers in Mindanao province together, Manny observed Jinkee interacting with the children, the natural way she communicated with them, without condescension or artificiality. The girl of approximately 10 years, with bright eyes and hair tied in simple braids, approached the boxer timidly. "Is it true that you were once poor like us?" she asked in a low voice. Manny crouched down to the child's height, finding in her eyes the reflection of his own past. "Yes, little one. I slept on the streets and often had nothing to eat." The girl studied him for a moment before responding with the disconcerting wisdom of children. "So, Mrs. Jinkee built these places so that nobody needs to get hurt fighting like you did." Manny felt a lump in his throat as he perceived the profound truth contained in that innocent question. The following months saw a gradual transformation in the Pacquiaos' public and private lives. Manny significantly reduced his commercial commitments and appearances at social events to dedicate himself to the bill advancing through Senate committees. His public figure, previously associated primarily with sporting success and social ascension, gained a new dimension as an advocate for effective public policies to reduce child poverty. Political analysts who previously saw his presidential candidacy as a project based mainly on his popularity now recognize the emergence of a substantive and differentiated platform in the Philippine political landscape. Jinkee, in turn, publicly assumed the general coordination of the projects she had created in the shadows, bringing her accumulated experience to help structure the national program proposed by her husband. Her discreet but firm presence in public hearings and technical meetings revealed a woman of sharp intelligence and profound knowledge of the country's social realities, qualities that had always been there but had remained invisible under the simplistic label of famous boxer's wife. Together, Manny and Jinkee formed a partnership that represented the ideal combination of popular charisma and technical competence, a political force that transcended individual personalities. On a sunny Sunday afternoon, while the complete Pacquiao family, including the 5 children who now actively participated in social projects, visited a new community center in the central region of Luzon, Manny observed the scene around him with a sense of fulfillment he had never experienced after any victory in the ring. Children ran across the simple but well-maintained courtyard, some practicing the basic boxing movements he himself had taught the previous week. Others concentrated on books under the shade of a large mango tree. There were no cameras recording the moment, No reporters seeking impactful statements, just the raw and hopeful reality of lives being transformed away from the spotlight. Jinkee approached silently and intertwined her fingers with her husband's, observing the same scene. "Do you regret it?" she asked in a low voice, referring to Manny's recent decision to indefinitely postpone his presidential candidacy plans to focus on implementing community centers in all provinces of the archipelago. Manny smiled, gently squeezing his wife's hand before answering, "How could I regret discovering the true purpose of all my fighting? You showed me that true victory isn't in positions or titles, but in what we leave for those who come after us." As the sun began to set over the mountains of Luzon, casting golden shadows over the small community center, Manny Pacquiao, the boy who had sold cigarettes on the streets to survive, the young man who had fought furiously to escape poverty, the champion who had conquered the world, and the politician who had aspired to maximum power, finally understood the deeper meaning of his extraordinary journey. It wasn't the world titles in 8 different weight categories that would define his legacy, nor even the laws he managed to pass in Congress, but the thousands of Filipino children who, thanks to his wife's silent vision and the support he now gave to that vision, would have the opportunity to build their own paths without the suffering that had marked his childhood. And in this understanding, the legendary boxer found a peace that no previous glory had provided him.
Leave your like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next cases.